Welcome everybody to your Frax Check, your weekly Frax vibe check. I am your host, Capital K, and I'm joined by my co-host, DeFi Dave, and our producer extraordinaire, Sam. We will be going straight to the source of truth via checking the chain, but quick hat tip to Seba, the dude wizard, for putting the dashboards together. Thank you, Seba. Before we jump in, please subscribe to our Flywheel Pod on YouTube, and you can follow us at Flywheel Pod on Twitter and Telegram. Now, without further ado, let's check the chain. So we always start with the health check, and the first thing comes up is the peg. So for this week, we saw that it went from 0.998 all the way to 1.002. Peg in check. Second, I always like to go to Curve and swap 100 million worth of Frax into USDC, and I received a 0.9989 exchange rate. Still good. Lastly, we look at our collateralization ratio, which actually increased to 90.75% from last week's 90.5%. But also, the decentralized percent also increased compared to last week. We were 18.3, now we're 18.6. So things are getting better on that front. After the health check, we always look at the AMOs. And on this slide, we're going to dive into Frax's 4 largest AMO, which is the Curve, Liquidity, Lender, and Investor AMOs. Starting with the Curve AMO, which had 770 million, Liquidity AMO of 129, Lending AMO of 19, and Investor of 27, all of that totaling up to 945 million, which is actually a 1.1% week over week change from the last time we looked at this. So it was a good week. It increased mainly attributed to the Liquidity AMO as well as the Investor AMO, obviously since price rallied over the last week. Now look at the profitability here. You see, remember last week I said we had to pay this massive amount of expenses because of the convex thing. We prepay for all the revenues to come. And guess what? This week, the revenue came. We saw an increase of 26% in our revenue, going from, I believe, 4 point something all the way to 5.25 million. So that was a big win this week. And now you also saw that expenses actually slightly went down. Given that, the Frax price also kind of went down a little bit this week. So our bribes and our spend decreased because of that. And you're looking at, for the month of August, which pretty much is the end, we made $1 million in profit. Like, I don't think a lot of protocols out there can say they made $1 million in pure profit for like their monthly cash. Like, that's amazing. Like, you annualize that's 12 mil run rate in a bear market.
Wow.
So I think we're onto something here. But anyways, let's take a look at the last piece, which is the Frax liquidity, which is my favorite part, where we look at the Frax based pool, as my co-host loves to call it. And the TVL increased by 1.8% this week to 785 million. Nice. And that is actually 86% of the 3 pool. Like I said, this is the flippening that I'm waiting for. We're down a little bit. We were 89% last week, but it's okay. It's okay. We're still stacking. Another thing that I like to look at is the Metapool, which are all the other stable coins that are, or rather any other coin that are paired with the base pool. And we saw that go down slightly to 49.7 million. However, it actually peaked at 52 million kind of like 3 days ago. But I think people may have withdrawn from there to ape into some coins just because of the drawdown this last like 3 days that we saw. So we're pretty much unchanged on the Metapool front. Lastly, this is interesting though. Circulating supply of Frax has been flat for the majority of the last 2 weeks that we did the Frax check. But out of nowhere, we printed 50 mil extra Frax this week, which increased of 3.5%. So that was a nice little uptick there. That's a number that I always like to see going up. Now, with that, it concludes our weekly Frax check, and I am capital K. As I said, I'm joined by my co-host DeFi Dave and our producer extraordinaire, Sam. Now I'm going to hand it off to Dave to talk a little bit about the governance roundup for us.
Hey everyone, I'm DeFi Dave here to bring you the governance roundup for the week. I got my handy notes right here. 4 things stuck out to me. We're going to go over FIP 105 through 108. 2 of these proposals are actually up to snapshot right now, so let's get it going. FIP 105 basically seeks $5,000 to seek legal advice for the whole phase situation. It was proposed by someone named Johnny. I'm not sure who he is. It's actually live on Snapshot right now, and you can see that there's 64K in favor of seeking legal advice. Next one is FIP 106, which is a proposal to have a gauge for the concentrator AFXS. If people don't know, Concentrator is a product from Aladdin DAO that lets you auto-compound convex yields. They're proposing a FXS only, like their version of an FXS compounder to receive extra yields from an FXS gauge. There's been a little bit of pushback by the community, specifically C2TP and Mark 11. C2TP sees the protocol as somewhat overkill because they're already compounding FXS, like why do they need to add more? And he suggests that instead they actually pair a FXS with a Frax BP Metapool. Mark 11 shares the same sentiment. He also agrees that it's overkill and suggests they actually have a Frax A FXS gauge similar to the Pitch FXS Frax gauge. So if you're a protocol, you're looking to get a FXS gauge, make sure that your only focus is on increasing Frax usage. That's my advice to you. Nothing else. Otherwise, it will probably get some pushback and not get the support you're looking for. So even if like you have something that pairs with Frax or pairs with Frax BP, that is much more suitable. The goal is to increase Frax usage. So on to the next one. FIP 107 was quite interesting. It's to redeploy the AG ERU Frax gauge into an AG ERU Frax BP pool gauge. This was authored by FraxCG, who I believe is Grills on Twitter, which is he's been an early supporter of Frax since the beginning. I remember him writing threads about Frax back in 2020. So he's an OG. He's a Fraximalist for sure. And so right now with the current AGEUR Frax gauge, it's a Uni v3 vault, and because of the whole action with the euro, it's actually quite imbalanced. So he suggests that we deprecate that pool completely and just deploy an AGERU Frax BP pool instead. This one is currently up for vote. It currently has 465,000 votes in favor, 0 against. I think this is actually, like, personally speaking, I actually just voted for this right before the podcast, right before the episode. I think this is a no-brainer. So it makes sense to deploy to the Frax BP pool. The next one is FIP 108. It's to add 2 new Frax BP Metapool gauges for PUSD, which is the native stablecoin of JPEG, and MAI, which is a zero-interest crypto lending protocol that's on 50 different chains. I'm actually a big fan of both protocols. It was proposed by C2TP. They're already receiving CVX and CRV rewards. This would just add a Frax gauge to them. I expect this one to get passed no problem. And also the whole goal of Frax BP is just to increase its usage overall. So that's a roundup for all the Frax governance. I'm your host, DeFi Dave. Don't forget to find me on Twitter. I'm at DeFi Dave 22. And that is actually, is there anything else you guys want to go over? Anything else on your guys' minds?
No, I think you summed it up pretty clearly. I mean, these outside of the Euro pool, I think everything's pretty straightforward there.
Yeah.
The only questions I have about the Euro pool is like, what happens if the Euro goes down to like 80, right? Let's say there's another 20% decline. Like, is the base pool able to absorb that, or is that a matter of like setting the A levels and the other parameters within? It
might be a matter of setting the A levels and stuff. That'll be interesting to see it develop, because that's stuff happening off chain in the real world that's going to affect stuff on chain. It's not like, a stablecoin collapse and that's an all like on-chain phenomenon. This is like an off-chain phenomena happening right now. We're seeing like the ramifications kind of trickle over on chain.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they'd be. Yeah, I guess it's just the proper design of like the curve pool then. And then Sam and the team are pretty smart, so I'm sure they'll understand how to set the parameters for that.
Yeah. And with that, that's this week's Frax Check, your weekly Frax vibe check. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications for YouTube. You want to make sure you be getting every single Flywheel pod piece of content. We're going to be really ramping up in the next few weeks. You're going to see it, and you're going to get the content you've been craving. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at FlywheelPod. Join our Telegram group at FlywheelPod. I'm your host, DeFi Dave. You can find me on Twitter at DeFi Dave22.
And you can find me at 0x_K.
And I'm at traders_insight.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.